How refreshing it is to know that every Christian ever understands atheist positions on their God and never misrepresents what we actually think and then fight against that straw man they've created. Is what I would have said if that was actually the case. Unfortunately for many atheists such as myself, it is all too common to come across religious folk of really any theistic religion that make up completely clueless images of what it actually means to be an atheist. I'm not dense enough to make assumptions as to why that is the case when I have no expertise on the matter, unlike some people, but I can say with certainty that it is beyond a frequent occurrence to a lot of us. A lot of the time, these theists would rather form a too colloquial response rather than discuss the issues brought up in the first place. Take Kyle as a rather fitting example. A pattern I see in Kyle's videos quite frequently is that I don't think he wants any sort of useful discussion. He just wants to yell at people he disagrees with. I'm not even saying that it's bad to make content that isn't thought-provoking to your intellectual opponents. I just find it extremely annoying that this is how he presents himself when he himself made a video responding to Sick, great YouTuber by the way, where he complains that Sick doesn't make too many thoughtful rebuttals in his videos and instead focuses on silly responses. If you actually want to argue that the criticisms that have been presented to you are stupid, why not actually talk about a channel who civilly and thoroughly explains why you're wrong, such as Vice Rhino? I'm not saying that Kyle's channel is supposed to spark thoughts and counterpoints in those he disagrees with. I sure hope that's not what he's trying to do. But it is extremely frustrating when you say that kind of stuff about YouTube channels that are meant to be based on stupid, absurd humor. You see that, Kyle? That's me being honest with the way I see the way you present yourself and responding in accordance to that behavior. You should try it sometime. But this is all besides the real point of this video. In actuality, I want to actually watch some of Kyle's videos and see if he actually has anything at least somewhat thoughtful to say.
I have heard no atheist answer this critique. If you're just going to comment Flying Spaghetti Monster, Sky Daddy, you can't convert me, you've already made up your mind. I've been like that before. But then I started to actually hear people out. I saw there's inconsistencies in my worldview, in my paradigm, and that I can't justify my basic assumptions.
I'll say it right now. There is no way that Kyle can convert me. And that has nothing to do with me having already made up my mind. That has to do with A, how Kyle is speaking to me, and B, his lack of insightful and meaning arguments. You can't convert me if all you're going to do is misrepresent what I actually believe and belittle me. That ain't gonna work, Chief.
And so we think that it's a problem, a lack of facts and evidence.
When it comes to us not believing in your God, then yeah, it absolutely is. To say there is no evidence of your God would be dishonest of me. The truth of the matter really is that all the evidence that I've seen is absolute dog shit. From what I've seen, believing in your God takes a pretty big leap of faith, which is a huge issue to me. Why would the right answer to one of the biggest and most important questions, while many Christians admit to being such a huge question, of whether God exists or not, require any faith at all instead of reliable, testable, and repeatable evidence and data? We can effectively answer just about every other question with the scientific method and the like, but does God exist? Is able to completely disregard all that and just require faith? I'm sorry, dude, but that goes against one of my biggest principles. If I'm going to believe something with any amount of certainty, there needs to be a reliable way to prove it.
We think there's such thing as brute facts that aren't theory-laden.
What do you mean by that? Are you saying that scientific theories aren't facts? If so, then I hate to break it to you, but you're wrong. And also, yeah, there is such thing as brute facts. Things just are the way that they are, and no matter how you disagree, that does not ultimately affect how true it is. I know you don't accept the theory of evolution, which is ignorant by itself, but I'm comfortable in saying that it doesn't really matter what you say or think about the theory. It's still a fact. Now, on the contrary, we have your God, something that is not definitive.
That don't require interpretation, and every fact and every evidence requires interpretation.
Wrong. Data is often interpreted differently between people, but facts are still facts. They're still true no matter how someone interprets them. These facts, dude, they don't give a shit about your feelings.
Something like the resurrection of Christ. I can bring that up to an atheist, but they can reinterpret it to fit their worldview.
It's less of conforming it to our worldviews, and I really do want to emphasize the S there because there is no atheist worldview, but instead it's usually looking at the evidence we have and coming up with potential explanations, often more realistic explanations, that do not require any supernatural intervention or superstition to believe. The issue we have is that supernatural incidents are just that, supernatural, and the supernatural is outside of what is natural and so is not testable in reality. So we have no way of verifying it or making any certain assessments of any given supernatural event. But that's if we're being honest with ourselves, isn't it? So you're saying that we will do anything in our power to mold the situation so that it doesn't leave or break out of our small worldview? I disagree. Again, we are just looking at what little data we have and coming up with more accurate judgments based on what we can already know about reality. And often, when we admit ignorance, you guys often take that as a sign that everything else we say about the matter is wrong.
Oh, it was just mass hallucination. Oh, he actually survived the crucifixion, and actually there was multiple Jesuses. Actually, it was just a lie. Actually, it was just a conspiracy. Whatever it is, we will make explanations to make our worldview, to make our paradigm work.
This is exactly what I was just talking about. All of those other explanations of Jesus' resurrections that were actually accurate to what people actually say is just looking at what we can know and already know and coming up with a reasonable alternative explanation. Take the hallucination explanation, for example. We know that the human mind is very, very, very fallible, and that there really weren't that many people that supposedly saw Jesus after his resurrections. Dreams and visions are already unreliable as is, and anecdotal evidence, especially from such few people, is equally as reliable. Even more so considering it's over a millennia old testimony that we have no way of verifying beyond the Bible. And before you say it, the Bible is also an unreliable way of determining if what the Bible says is accurate. I really hope I didn't need to say that, but based on past experiences, I unfortunately think it was necessary.
And so, what would I need to prove Christianity and God to an atheist?
What I need is reliable and testable evidence which can be properly predicted that what you say is true. But there are a few issues with that, I admit. Your God has intentional states that presuppose fallibility, who is supposedly also omnipotent, which presupposes infallibility. So, in math terms, P is not P. P does not equal P. That makes it impossible. That makes your God impossible in reality. Again, that makes believing in your God require faith, which is a huge issue. If you want to prove to me that your God exists, you have to bring exceptional evidence to the table. What exactly that evidence would be, I'm not sure. Pretty sure it can't even exist because P doesn't equal P. But I do know what does not count as reliable evidence, and your book is one of those things.
They may set up this, arbitrary criteria, but then if it actually happened, would they actually change their worldview?
Proving a God to exist wouldn't change any of my worldviews. Thinking that it actually would is just arrogant on your part. Atheism isn't a worldview. Not believing in any gods isn't a worldview, so proving to me that a God does exist wouldn't change my worldview. Would I accept that God exists? Would I no longer be an atheist? Of course. Does that mean that any part of my worldview has changed? Does that mean that I would start worshipping that God? No.
In the Christian worldview requires you to transform your lifestyle too. And that's the thing, is most of us are stubborn and we're stuck in our comfort zones. We don't really want to challenge our lifestyle. We don't want to change our lifestyle or our worldview. And this isn't just about religion.
What he said there is actually true. Most people are very stubborn and don't like leaving their comfort zone. This is just a natural trait we evolved with. But that's also kind of irrelevant right now. What is important is that we haven't seen the evidence that is meant to prove us wrong. It doesn't matter how uncomfortable it may or may not make us feel. We just haven't seen it. Arguing that even if you were to present us with the evidence, we'd just ignore it, that's just a thought-terminating cliche because you really have no reason to believe that.
Because even if someone's overweight, they know that eating healthy and that working out is going to be good for them. They objectively know that. Or smokers know that smoking is bad for them. But does that get them to stop? A lot of them know this. But, we're stuck in our comfort zone, we're stubborn, or whatever the reason is. And so if we think about the most basic dogmas of, Christianity, atheism.
Wait, hold on. Did he just imply that there's atheistic dogma? That would also imply that he thinks that atheism comes with a set of rules like just how almost every religion does. Atheism isn't a religion. There is no atheist worldview and there is no atheistic dogma. Atheism is just an answer to one question. Do you believe in any god or gods? The spectrum of theism doesn't imply any single set of rules no matter where you stand, but is simply an answer to that question. Do you like the Sonic franchise? Yes? So that must mean you follow X, Y, and Z. No, that's not how any of this works. It's just as silly as saying people's favorite color impacts their personality.
Atheism, the Big Bang, and then new species, Darwinian, macroevolution, overall this time.
Atheism says none of that. Science suggests those things. We can prove those things. I know how you'd probably respond to that, so no. Science is not a religion either, and scientism isn't a real thing. Atheism and the science you disregard are not synonymous. Atheism and science are not synonymous. You could be an atheist or you could be a theist. You could be a part of a religion or of no religion. Doesn't matter. Everyone there can accept science. That's why most atheists and Christians alike believe in evolution. Anyone can be a scientist. It's like that one part of a Carl Sagan quote. Science is more than a body of knowledge. It is a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. Or that quote from Forrest Valkai. If you can question everything, assume nothing, and follow the evidence wherever it leads, the universe is yours. This is why there are scientists from every sort of religion.
And then Christianity, we have, the biblical miracles and the resurrection. And, we both believe these.
Are you trying to say that atheists believe in the biblical miracles? That's dumb. That's actually really dumb. Have you ever genuinely talked to an atheist? And I mean really talk to an atheist. Not talk at them, not only listening for something you can ridicule them for, not talk to them about something completely different, but if you actually genuinely listen to an atheist and listen to what they say they believe and take it to heart without trying to come up with an excuse as to why they are lying about what they believe, I don't think you have.
We never saw these, but we both believe these. But what are the assumptions? Prior to the physical, the metaphysical. We have a lot of assumptions in this that, the Big Bang and macroevolution, that physics, math, that everything operated in time, always operated in the same way.
These are not assumptions. These are not just stories. These are scientific facts. And you can't just say, oh, well, you assume these always work the same way, even when we weren't there to experience it. Which there's just so many issues with that. Let's just run down a few of them. 1. It's not an assumption. It's disregarding an unnecessary hypothesis. Considering that hypothesis as a possibility would just be what-if-isms and what-about-isms, and is completely unreliable. Saying that time has worked the same ever since the Big Bang has been completely functional so far, so we have no reason to believe anything different. If you want to suggest that it might have worked differently long ago, you've got your work cut out for you, because you're going to need a lot of really good evidence. 2. The cool thing about science is that we don't need to be present at any given event to know what happened. Say you're walking through woods and come across a sideways tree. A relatively complete tree with leaves, sticks, branches, and its roots out of the ground. It is a pretty safe assertion to make to say that the tree fell down. Well, how do you know? You never saw it. What if the tree was always like that? You're just adding nothing to the conversation. We know the tree fell down from multiple lines of evidence. 3. Are you saying that making assertions about past events we didn't witness is bad? If so, then why do you let yourself still hold on to Jesus' resurrection? I know those with the IQ of an igloo's room temperature might say, aren't you being hypocritical by making the tu quoque argument? But no, I'm not. I'm pointing out that he just did that, which makes it seem like he admits that it's supposedly bad to believe in things we never personally witnessed. And 4, what the fuck?
So that's an assumption, and now is that assumption justified?
No, they're not. And yes, it is. It could be said that there are some basic assumptions that are necessary for science, but to assume that they couldn't have a rational and logical foundation, or to assume that they suggest an intelligent agent for them to exist, would be really weird. This is so basic, yet you somehow don't understand, and it's frustrating, and I don't know what to say anymore. Why don't you understand this?
And this isn't the only assumption. I mean, there's lots of assumptions. Like, how do we assume and justify logic?
What? Logic is just a way of thinking that we develop to understand the world and universe around us from our perspective. It's just trying to reason out the human fallibility to come to conclusions that make sense regardless of personal experience. These types of things are able to be reasonably explained that are completely consistent with atheism. What are you even saying?
Why does logic exist? The atheist paradigm doesn't make any sense that something like math, logic, philosophy, all these things exist in a world that is in constant chaos and flux. Why should someone be ethical?
Satan, damn it. Do I really have to get into the moral argument right now? You know what? No, I'm not going to dive into that right now. All I'll say is that I don't require a supposed divine purpose or moral code to have basic human empathy. Morals are subjective. There. Can we lay this to rest now?
I mean, there's no ethics. It's just random chaos. There's no meaning.
Oh, what the fuck? So fucking what? That doesn't mean I have to live my life in sadness. I like feeling good. I don't understand why this is so difficult for so many Christians to understand.
And if there is meaning, it's arbitrary. It's human-made.
Yeah, I believe the meaning we give to ourselves is human-made. That's not an issue. You're using some sort of electronic device recording this video. That was human-made. Does that make it not meaningful or useful?
Versus in the Christian paradigm, we can perfectly account for math, physics, logic, all these things. We can justify our claims.
The Bible isn't a science textbook, and no, you cannot justify all your claims. Creationism, for example, is a claim that is often made by Christians, and yet they can't justify that because the Bible isn't a science textbook, and has quite a lot of poems and such, and was written by a lot of uneducated citizens back before the Enlightenment, when scientific knowledge was just a single grain of sand on the world's largest beach that it is today. Atheists can just as easily find reasons for a lot of that stuff. Just because you don't know that makes it an argument from ignorance. This is your biggest issue. You need to actually listen to an atheist who is trying to enlighten you on what they actually believe.
Atheists, justify logic, please. Give an explanation that you can't just say logic just is.
I don't. I have explained why logic exists in the past. I can do that. Not that you would actually want to know, so why even waste my time? And why can't I say logic just is? Why are you able to say God just is? That sounds like special pleading to me. It's not even like there's stuff in the universe that we can't just say they just are. Gravity exists. We know that. We know it's a fundamental force of the universe. Why does it exist? I don't know. It just does. Maybe one day we'll have a better answer to that question, but for right now, all we know is that it exists and it does stuff, and that's all we need to know right now.
These things are so fundamental to how we live. To not live with, trusting the past or trusting logic is just completely, it wouldn't work.
Even if we weren't able to explain why they are or how they came to be, that wouldn't mean we don't think they exist and that we can't be logical. It's okay to not know things. Sometimes it's okay to not know how something you do or use daily came to be.
A world without God, a world without logic and this consistency, the uniformity of nature.
Why did you lump God in there as if it's as factual as logic? It's not. Logic is something we know we can use like a tool. God is a whole lot different to that, especially your God, like your specific God. You are acting like the science we already have and know about can't explain these things, and just because you don't believe them doesn't mean they don't have huge explanatory power. The theory of evolution, for instance, is really important in understanding why we act and think the way we do. In fact, it's way more important and way bigger of a field than most people even consider it to be. To quote how evolution explains everything about life, as biologists are discovering, evolution can be stranger than their predecessors ever imagined. And that's because evolution is way more important than any of us could have ever possibly imagined. We can demonstrate that to be the case, and you're ignorant of that fact. That fact.
It would never happen. And so how do you actually know anything? We always have to refer to the past, inductive reasoning.
I didn't even realize this before, but why are you targeting these questions towards atheists? Most atheists don't think this deep into it. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this topic. Why are you asking me? Just because a lot of us may not know the answer to these questions doesn't mean there aren't people who do. Go ask a specialist in this field if you really want to know. But you don't, do you? You're asking us because you know you can stump some of us on these questions, aren't you? You never actually ask someone qualified to answer these questions because that's not what you're actually looking for. Atheists don't need to have all the answers to all these questions and understand every little bit of nuance that comes with it to be valid. I am always comfortable saying that I don't know.
How do you know something? Past knowledge. And so if you can't even justify the past and logic, how can you justify anything? How can you even justify knowledge? It makes knowledge impossible because you have to refer to the past, which there is no justification for. So can an atheist please give an account in their paradigm for logic? Please. It does not make any sense.
Beyond what I've said, nobody needs to know everything. I can simply tell you what I believe, and I don't really have to justify it unless I make an actual claim. If you really are looking for answers to these questions, I'm sorry, bud. You're looking in the wrong place. I honestly probably wouldn't even tell you anyway because I would figure it wouldn't be worth my time.
And a lot of people realize the inconsistencies in this and they try and just build their own system.
Inconsistencies where? Questions aren't inconsistencies. Hell, questioning things is my jam, dude. And even if they do try to answer those questions and they turn out to be wrong, what's the big deal? I would rather live like I do right now, believing in what I do until proven wrong and changing my mind, than live in ignorance and hold on to my belief despite all the evidence. I don't care that some stuff within the realm of evolution is being changed a little bit, is being modified to be more accurate. I don't need to be right on everything for it to be true, and I'd rather update my knowledge than continue to be wrong. Wouldn't you?
Whether it be, in the Enlightenment, deism, in the simulation theory now, these are reiterating things that have already been debunked. Versus Revelation, it was not built by a man. It was built by God.
So what potentially atheist people are wrong? And what makes you so sure it was built by a god? This is the issue. You're trying to get us to believe in something by presenting us with stuff that requires a person to assume the conclusion is true to believe. You're putting the cart before the horse. It isn't effective. I recommend you reconsider how you go about this if this is really how you try to convince atheists that Christianity is true.
And the Christian paradigm can account for everything.
Yeah, it can. That it doesn't make it accurate. You're begging the question whenever you do fit something in. God and Christianity are true, so I'm going to answer all these questions with that. Instead of, that's interesting. I wonder if I can figure out what exactly this means by reliable means before I make any definitive assertions. And while I may believe this one thing to be the case, I'm going to try my hardest to see if I'm right or if I need to adjust my hypothesis. You're telling us all these answers to these questions are God, without proving to us that God exists. You're missing the mark. You're misunderstanding the issue at hand. The issue is not that we might not be able to answer some of your questions. The issue is that we don't believe in your God, so we have no reason to believe in the explanations you give. We don't believe in your God, so we cannot assume that God answers all of these questions.
Logic, math, physics, the good, the evil, the beautiful, purpose, the problem of evil.
Not from what I've heard. The problem of evil is still a problem as far as I'm concerned. Just saying. Please, go on.
Why good things happen to bad things happen to good people? It's an all-encompassing, holistic web of beliefs.
So that makes it right? When I'm searching for the truth, I'm not looking for someone who can answer the most questions. I'm looking for the most reliable answers, regardless of how many questions are answered. There are a million different answers to every possible question, but not every one of them is the right one. So how do you know that your answers are the right one?
Why can we have access to all these beliefs? Because there's the personal divine mind. It is not some impersonal clockmaker God.
The thing about your religion is that you're trying to stretch all these answers into your personal worldview. Eventually, it's hard to make everything line up, so your continuity starts to tear. That's why I think a lot of what Christians say is contradictory. Because they try to make everything fit where it doesn't. Like a puzzle piece that at first glance looks like it fits with another, but it turns out to go somewhere else. If you keep insisting it goes there, then the puzzle's gonna look a little wonky in the end. So this next part is entirely about morality. I've said this earlier, but I really don't want to talk about this too much in this video. I can make an entirely different video just on these less than 2 minutes he spends on morality, but for right now, I'm just gonna skip it and go to the part of the video he calls Best Argument for Atheism?
These best atheist apologists do not even talk about these arguments. Can they give a justification for logic? Can they give a justification for why the past is going to be like the future? Why the future is going to be like the past?
Yeah, a lot of them can. Jumping over the fact that I'd not call a lot of them apologists. They don't even need to answer all of those questions because the burden of proof, 9 times out of 10, doesn't rest upon them.
Hitchens, Harris, Dillahunty, who is your best atheist? Because all they do, I watch their debates, they just tell stories and complain about God. They just complain about how evil he is and, why these bad things happen.
Yeah, a lot of atheists talk about that kind of stuff because they themselves cannot make a positive claim. Instead, they need to argue why the other person's claim is wrong. This is a decent way of going about that. They're often talking about the problem of evil or how your God is supposed to be omnipotent and explain why they think that cannot be the case. They're not just complaining about God. They're reasoning why they think it doesn't exist. Is this why you believe in the biblical story of creation? Because you refuse to look deeper than the surface level meaning of everything you come across? That's what it is. You just hear these atheists talking about their issues and assume they're just being whiny instead of looking at the bigger picture. They're highlighting a single point for a reason. Stop it, Kyle. Stop it.
But the thing is, you can't even judge that something is evil without God.
No, you're just wrong. You're just saying that. You need to back that up, which you haven't done. If that was the case, then sure, atheists' claim on morality may be wrong. but you haven't even attempted to justify that it was God or that God is even real. Again, you're missing the mark. An atheist is likely not going to trust you until you can prove your premise. Your premise in this case being that there is a God. Oh, and that it's a Christian God. Oh, and that it's your specific Eastern Orthodox Christian God. Oh, and that it's a specific type of Eastern Orthodox Christian God the way you individually interpret it.
The Christian paradigm can explain the problem of evil. Why is there evil? Because of original sin.
Citation needed.
Why do bad things happen to good people? Read the story of Job in the Bible.
No, I don't care what the Bible says until you can prove the Bible to be true and accurate without using the Bible. You guys always refer back to the Bible. Stop doing that. Do you not understand that we don't believe in the Bible, so we're not going to trust what the Bible says? A lot of atheists are actually very biblically literate, and I think it's much like what Aaron Ra said. Nobody reads the Bible more literally than an atheist, because we don't need to make up any excuses. Many of us already know these passages very well. Do you think that telling us to read it one more time is just going to make us go, "Ah, yes, of course! How could I have been so foolish? I just needed to read this one passage for the millionth time."
We actually have a paradigm that can account for all these things. The good, the evil, the beautiful, all these things, logic, everything. Because the world is designed and structured.
Sure, maybe it's because of that, but maybe it's not. And it's not. This is just you repeating the same rhetoric ad nauseum and expecting everyone to just fall for it. Well, it won't work. You can't fool me, Kyle.
And the other thing is that, I've heard Hitchens say God is like a dictator, but God isn't.
He literally is. He alone gets to decide what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad, who goes to heaven and who goes to hell, what and what not he will do to any single individual because of the actions he knew from the beginning they would commit. Oh, so we have free will? Cool! God never intervenes with our free will and never makes a planet out of a molehill. Except for the times where he does, and except for the times where he killed countless amounts of people just because they hurt his feelings.
You have free will. You can do whatever you want. You can live as you please.
Haha, I got you. I knew you were going to say that.
And hell is just the consequence of our actions. If you don't like God and church in this life, why would you like it afterwards?
Why would God require us to make a huge leap of faith to one of the biggest questions imaginable unless he was tyrannical? Why do you get to go to heaven and I don't? I don't think the ends justify the means, and no other story would the good guy kill and eternally punish people just because they don't like him. In no other story would the good guy give people an eternal punishment for a temporary crime, no matter how small the crime is. You want to know why? Because nobody would think they're the good guy.
And God gave us a purpose. And, he cares about us. He wants to be a part of our life.
He cares about us so much that he'll punish us eternally for his mistakes. He wants to be a part of our lives so much that he can't intervene with our free will, except for the times where he did. He's such a good God that he won't even show his face or help people he cares about so much so that they won't spend the rest of eternity in hell. Seems like a shitty friend. If God was my friend, I would break off that relationship right away. Don't even try to say that I'm just being whiny and I don't want to be responsible for myself or anything like that, because everything that I just said has nothing to do with me, no matter how much you or your God wants to make it seem like it is. This is his fault. He made this happen. It's just a classic case of guilt tripping.
He cared enough to redeem us in Christ.
Why is that a good thing exactly, and how exactly did this help us? Nobody has been able to give me a reasonable explanation as of now.
In Pascal's wager, they think, just because there's a lot of religions, there's either truth or there isn't truth. But since there's lots of religions, none of them are true.
Pascal's wager is waged by Christians. That's the entire point. No atheist says that just because there are so many religions that none of them are the true religion. It's just goofy to assume that one of them is more truthful than the other. Nobody says that multiple choices equal no choice. There are multiple choices. That doesn't mean that the ones we see are the right ones. What if the real true one is the one we haven't discovered? Pascal's wager is stupid. It's so stupid and tired.
I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. If there is truth, maybe there's little hints of truth, and some religions are closer to the truth than the others.
Or maybe the truth lies outside of religion. Religion hasn't been of any assistance in helping us discover truth. It's only held us back. We can determine truth, and it does not matter which religion is closest to us, because none of them hit the mark. Oh, you failed the test, but out of everyone in the class, you failed the least. You failed. You failed to find the truth, but you still try to act like Christianity had it all along. It was just hidden within the scripts. They weren't. You can keep throwing shit at the wall and hoping for something to eventually stick, but just because something does at some point does not mean that it was somehow more enlightened than the rest.
A practical reason to not be an atheist. Studies show that religious people are happier, they're more involved in the community, they vote more, they're just more involved in the community. And this makes sense, like...
And yet you don't take into consideration these articles? Don't get it twisted. I'm not trying to say that religion makes people less happy or that atheism does, but this stuff you're saying, Kyle, this stuff you're saying is ignorant. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut this response off short. I don't want to make this video too long, and it seems for everything Kyle had to say, I had something to say tenfold. There is still quite a bit more to his video, but if I were to respond to all of it, this video would almost certainly be over an hour long, and I don't really want to do that. But if you would like me to make a part 2 where I cover the rest of his video, let me know. As for right now, I think I did a decent job of responding to what I have, so I'll leave it at that. For anyone interested, I actually recommend you go watch Genetically Modified Skeptic's new video in response to Ben Shapiro. Some of his video overlaps with some stuff I talked about or implied here, and he is way smarter than I could ever imagine to be, so he earns my respect there. This is for Kyle directly. If I do make a second part to this video, then I will cover the moral argument. I'm not avoiding anything in your video. It's just a tad exhausting how bad everything you say is. Claiming that it's dumb that I only covered a part of your video is what I would consider to be gish galloping. And I will not make a second part because you will have proved that you are not worth my time. Not saying you were to begin with, I definitely regret watching anything you've made, but at that point I'll just back off. However, if you do wish yourself that I make another video covering you, I want to know that you've watched this video all the way through and actually listened to me. Not just yell at me or repeat the same things over and over and over again, or anything like that. You just have to listen to me regardless if you agree with me or not. I hope this video reaches you. Sincerely, Keegan.